What's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of the Well Man's Podcast. My name is Bryan Brozy. I'm joined by my friend and co-host Keoni Tita. Keoni, how are you today?
Doing wonderful. Thanks everybody for listening to us once again. As you know, Bryan and I put out these podcasts to really just, for selfish reasons, to help ourselves also, because we learn a lot from this, but also just to help people live better lives. And I think this podcast we're going to talk about today is a fascinating take, because I feel like one of the biggest problems with our existence, if you will, and yes, it's going to be like a philosophical discussion, but is this, sense of not being good enough. We're going to talk about failure. We're going to talk about maybe the meaninglessness of life, the absurdity of life. And we're all going to base it on a philosopher who fascinates me named Emil Cioran. And a wonderful, want to put a plug in for Philosophize This, because we're kind of going off of that. But I wanted to bring it up because I have a lot of my patients, I think, who could really benefit from this. And I know it sounds kind of like nihilistic and like, what is it worth living and all that, but that is exactly what fascinates me about Emil Cioran, because he basically talks about embracing this stuff that we consider taboo subjects, like failure and suicide and the absurdity of life. And he comes across as very nihilistic, but because of that, he helps us make meaning out of our existence. So I find it fascinating, because I think we've all, if you live in this world like we all do, we go through our ups and downs, right? We've all experienced like sadness. Hopefully, Emil Cioran would say, if you experience failure, you're lucky. Maybe some of us have contemplated suicide, so on and so on. Maybe for a lot of us, there's an extreme sense of loneliness. And the thing that fascinates me about him is he talks about this stuff and talks about it from a philosophical perspective and tries to intellectualize it and just get real. I mean, he helps us get real with ourselves. So, for example, if you I don't know, believe in a divine creator or something like that, I don't know, say it started this whole existence experiment, whoever did that. At the end of the day, when you're really down and out and you're really thinking about what is the meaning of life and stuff, and you kind of concentrate on that, he uses, when you're asking for this divinity for help or whatever, what do you actually hear? What do you actually hear in your head? And he basically says, Bill, basically you hear nothing. Just nothing. There's no voice that comes back at you. I mean, if you do, you're just fooling yourself. But the thing that's fascinating about him is he turns this around to say, and that is where you can find meaning. So I recommend people listen to him. He has this saying that I love. It's the fact that life has no meaning is a reason to live. Moreover, it's the only one we have. So it's kind of you embrace the absurdity and the meaninglessness of life to move yourself forward and feel like you're making a change, or feel like you're being successful, and you're not dressing it up in something that for example, like let's say you join one of these, for lack of a better term, and Philosophize This, he calls it an optimistic cult. You join this, but at the end of the day, you're gonna get slapped in the face with reality. And if you're constantly happy clappy about everything, when you get slapped in the face, you're constantly getting a reminder that life has its ups and downs.
Right.
It has its ups and downs, and that's part of life, and we should embrace that. And a lot of these topics that we are kind of taboo for us, like nobody likes talking about their failures, right? Certainly, I know nobody likes to talk about, well, think about it. So for example, if you go to like a cocktail party, nobody's ever saying things, well, yeah, I got a job shoveling manure and I got fired, or I they don't talk about that. And actually, or I got married and I have a divorce and yada yada yada. They don't
Right.
talk about that. And maybe if we did talk about stuff like that, first of all, I think people like that, as Cioran says, are much more interesting to get to know.
Mhm.
And then also they're also looking at you and saying, or at least you should be saying to yourself, is, yeah, I can totally relate with you,
Right.
um, so that's what I love about it, because he kind of embraced that. He embraces that the world is flawed. He's not faking it. He's being realistic about it. And it's created, and suffering is a norm. And unfortunately, all of us do whatever we can to avoid that suffering, whatever we can do it,
Right.
through drugs, through I don't know, whatever your form of medicine is. And sometimes if you embrace it, maybe you can help reduce the suffering and
Mhm.
really, really be, think about it in terms of that way, instead of being a taboo subject.
Right.
So at least go ahead.
I just wanted to ask about Cioran because this is the first time I heard of him when I
Yeah.
was listening to this podcast. Is he a Stoic philosophizer? What is his like? When is he from, Keoni?
He was actually born in Romania. He's contemporary, 1911.
Okay, so this is not some woo woo
No,
wearing, hanging
no,
out at the Greece bathhouse. Okay.
no, it's not that. No, he's a contemporary philosopher. And what's fascinating about him, I think he goes a step beyond Stoicism.
Okay.
All right. And
And by that, yeah.
what I mean by that is, Stoicism is kind of like, when you're confronted with the downs of life and they kind of slap you in the face, is that you try not to create more suffering than is already there, right? You just plow through it. You move towards, you see it as a learning experience and stuff, and it kind of brushes off that you don't really, get emotional about it. That's where the name Stoicism comes from. And it's an unfair stereotype, but the Stoics kind of like it's an unfair stereotype of being like the emotionless person. You just plow through life, nothing can really bother you, so on and so on.
Right.
But if you're sitting on the street, and Stephen West uses this and philosophizes this, basically, if you're waiting in line for a sandwich, how are you going to act when that an asteroid is coming at you? You're not just going to be sitting there smiling and acting like you're waiting for a sandwich. Or how are you going to act if you actually experience like significant tragedy in your life? It's kind of like, what does that all mean? And to Cioran, it's like, yeah, it's kind of awful and it kind of meaningless, and there's absurdity to it, and you should basically embrace that. So I see that as going a step beyond. It's like, yeah,
A
it's
little bit more
okay.
leaning into the emotion.
Yeah, a little bit more. That's the way I would think about it. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
1911. So yeah, it is contemporary. It is you. I don't know if this is correct or not with, you know, just philosophy as a whole, but 1911, you kind of think about what was going on there. World War One. This guy living through World War Two in Romania. He's definitely
Oh
starting
yeah,
to
a
get a
lot, a lot, a lot going on, right? A lot of absurdity going on.
Yeah, right. Right. Really brings this to the forefront.
Right. And you can apply it today too, right?
Yes.
I mean, how many innocent people are dying of this, virus, or whatever? What's going on in Afghanistan right now and that type of thing. It doesn't mean that you don't do something to try to help or whatever, but it also doesn't mean that you throw your hands up in the air and become very nihilistic about it, and live your life in kind of like this depressive attitude or whatever, or even contemplate suicide.
Right. But you said something about Cioran saying kind of appreciate the meaningless. And with that, Keoni, what ways have you established to remember that? Or, I put myself in just thinking about this in regards to sitting in traffic, like on a work day, And you got, it adds an hour to the beginning of your day, adds an hour to the end of your day, and it is completely meaningless and just painful torture type experience.
And not only that, Bryan, guess what? Unless you become president, I'd vote for you. But unless you become president of the United States, nobody's going to know me and you existed 50 years from now. Maybe they'll see us on this podcast if it lives. But yeah, you will cease to exist. And after a few generations, your children or whatever, family members, people are not even going to know you existed. So to me, that's kind of one of those things where, damn, that's kind of,
what's the suffering for?
Why suffer about it? And why don't you just laugh about it, enjoy the meaninglessness of it? And then also here's the other thing, right? If when we talk about failure, if you look at failure that way, you will almost look forward to and can at least intellectualize that you need failure to succeed anyway.
Right. But what confuses me about the philosophy here at this point is, enjoy kind of the meaninglessness of sitting in traffic, but my success-driven type just personality or what you want would, I need to use that time well. I need to listen to an audiobook that's going to help me in business or whatever the case may be. And with, it's almost like I'm not appreciating the meaningless, but this is also taking those steps, which is talked about by Cioran and talked about in that Philosophize This episode, where you also don't want to go, you don't want to bat 4 and 4. You want to have some failure, because that means, you're brushing up against what you can maximally do and constantly striving for more.
Yeah.
So
it almost
seems to be a dichotomy, which they talked about in the episode, but a dichotomy between, yes, this is all meaningless and we need to appreciate just the meaninglessness of going through it and just having our experience. But then if we're not striving hard enough and experiencing these failures, we're not living a full life. So
I think that's
combating each other to me.
Well, but I think that's a good summary. Like that's the whole, like if you are not, you can use the meaninglessness of life to help yourself succeed. And because what you are actually doing is you become less nihilistic about it, less depressed about it. I mean, some people, when they really focus on this, can become really depressed about it.
Keoni, can you just tell us the definition of nihilistic?
Yeah. So you basically, the same, like, what's nihilism is this whole thought that what is the point of living? I mean, like there's no meaning to life. So I'm just going to end, if you take it to the extreme, you're like, suicide is a great option. Antinatalism isn't a great option too. It's kind of like one of those things where, the world sucks. There's a bunch of suffering around. So therefore I'm not going to bring children into this. That's how they rationalize that. I'm not going to bring children into a world where, climate change is happening and so on and so on. And it's almost like to me, it's intellectual dishonesty, in a sense where you are thinking about it, but you're also not being aware that do you realize how many people never had the chance that me and you did? How many potential embryos and deaths has shortened lives and all that? I mean, we are the lucky ones. I mean, if you really want to intellectualize it, we are the ones that have life. How many
thus we should enjoy this meaninglessness.
Right. How many couplings of parents or mates did it take for you to enjoy this life? I mean, how far back do you want to go? We can go back to the beginning of time. It's completely random, but yet you and I are on this freaking podcast here. I don't understand it. That's impossible. Like if somebody said 1,000,000 years ago, there will be two Caucasian dudes on a podcast, talking about, you're just like, it's like insanely impossible and crazy. So to me, that's where I go with it. So if that's the case, and you're completely a miracle by any standard, I would say, which is, you know, it's almost impossible, that you would use your time wisely to make meaning out of yourself and this life, and put meaning into it by kind of embracing the meaninglessness of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So existing and enjoying this existence, and the meaninglessness of it.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and it goes back to the thing you're talking about, stoicism. Just, you know, stoicism, you know, it's basically just accept things, you know, the way things are. But, you know, just accepting things is not enough. You know, you have to go a little bit further beyond, I think, you know. I mean,
is that next step what, rationalizing it?
well, it's like being one with your emotions and your humanness of it. You know, you don't have to, you know, it's okay to grieve and cry and to you know, you should be real with yourself. Why not? Why be so? I mean, think about in society, you know, when you come up to somebody and you say, and I should start doing this also, but just being real honest with everybody. I'm trying my best to do this, but you know, whenever you say, "Hey, Bryan, how you doing?" "Oh, I'm great, good." You know, and no, you aren't. You just lost your job and everything else. You know, it's kind of like we put these smiles on our face because all this stuff that we're talking about is kind of taboo.
Right.
You know, whereas it's just another way to be real with life and real with yourself. And that's why I really think he's great, because you're being I think intellectually honest instead of intellectually dishonest with yourself. And when you are slapped in the face with the absurdity of life, you lose your loved one or whatever, you know, for some people that is completely stifling, where, you know, they can't move on, you know, and even physically stifling, where you can actually get, you know, physically ill from stuff like that, you know. And I think this is a way to just kind of, you know, kind of running away from these subjects is kind of like a pacifier for people. And yet we all go through it. And to Emil Cioran, it's like, you know, embrace this stuff so that you can basically get more enjoyment out of life. And not only, you know, when we talk about failure, embracing your failures, we know, like, if you are, you know, the example used in philosophy is this: if I'm, you know, I suck at basketball, but I'd be the best basketball player in the world if I went out there. Well, maybe not. Maybe if I played 1-year-olds in basketball and that's all I competed against, you know, I'd be considered the best basketball player in the world. But you're not elevating yourself to see how, you know, and as soon as I play against Michael Jordan, I'm going to be slapped in the face with reality.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So it's one of these.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, it's just one of these things where, like you said, you should look forward to the failure so you can improve yourself, and it shouldn't be a taboo subject.
When you're going to have those failures, to demonstrate that you are, I guess, going through this meaninglessness and diving into it and your experience versus.
Well, you're going to have these failures to demonstrate who you are, how good you are, and what you need to work on, and how to improve yourself.
Yeah, and that you're actually diving into this existence. You're not just passively sitting there playing the first graders because it's comfortable in basketball or whatever the case may be. And there's you probably aren't aware, Keoni, but there is a fight this week, like a boxing fight, and it just fits this description very well, specifically with failure, because one of the guys, you may have heard of, the Jake Paul, Logan Paul brothers. They're like YouTube stars.
Right.
They've been boxing, I don't know, recently to, you know, be popular and whatnot. And for the first, he's boxed, you know, he had like a amateur YouTuber that he fought, and then he fought another YouTuber, and then he fought like a basketball player, and then he fought an old fighter who was much retired, had hip surgery, and just came out of retirement. And then now this weekend, he's supposed to fight, out of all of them, the most, you know, qualified test for him. And so this whole time, the buildup is how he's, you know, 4-4. He's essentially fighting the first graders in basketball and destroying them. And we want to see, you know, is this real? And this failure, this experience, this brushing up where you may have failure is the only way to find out
Yeah.
the trueness of ourselves or our true capabilities and whatnot.
And look what he's doing. I mean, how many people have the balls to do that, would do what he's doing?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good
You
point.
know, I mean, for you can talk shit about him all you want, but the fact that he's doing that, and
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. I'd be shitting myself fighting that guy, the other guy.
no, right, right. I mean, I think maybe that's part of his popularity. I mean, maybe he's hitting on something that people can embrace in their own lives in a way, you know, like push yourself. Where do you stand? Where do you succeed? You know, after all, like, you know, I wonder if he goes into his fight being like, you know, what the hell am I worried about? Life is meaningless anyway. I'm gonna beat the shit out of this dude here. You know, it's like no big deal anyway. I don't care what other people think. I'm the one in the ring. Nobody else took the chance to do this.
Well,
they're all too scared. They're too scared they're too scared to write the book. They're too scared to, you know, create the company.
To be uncomfortable.
You know, they're too scared to be uncomfortable. They're too scared to fail. You know, so that's where his you know, genius is. I mean, and here's a saying, and I think Jake Paul kind of fits this. But
I'm sorry to start this.
Well, I just do. I mean, I think, you know, it's, and all of us, but it's a great saying. Success is intimately related to how much you embrace your failures. I mean, that it is intimately related to that. You know, so if you can embrace your failures and be real with yourself, then you're going to be more likely to succeed. Instead of running away from your failures and not, you know, being real with yourself and others and getting objective feedback. You know, Cioran says constant success is the worst option. It's the worst option to even compare when you compare it to failure. You do not want that. And people live their lives like they have to constantly succeed and they hide their failures. It's just not a real way to live. So yeah, I think that's pretty. I think that's pretty cool. I think I also think another motivating factor is not only the meaninglessness of life, but also it goes back to Stoicism, and it's that memento mori, right? Remember the day of your death, and use it as a motivating factor to improve yourself and others and that type of thing. And with that, talking about death, I think Cioran has a fascinating take on suicide.
Yeah,
and I've dealt. Yeah, I think this can be helpful for a lot of people. You know, basically we talked about, you know, if you really think about it and you really think about, you know, the universe, our existence and all that, you know, we're on a piece of dust, you know, in an unknown, you know, non-extraordinary solar system, which is part of a kind of a mid-size galaxy, which is part of billions of galaxies. And at any moment, we can be taken out by who knows what. I mean, either ourselves, which it seems likely, or whatever. I mean, you can really wrap yourself up in this and then top that on. So you're thinking about this, and then you go into work, you get fired, you come home, now you're getting a divorce or whatever's going on in your life. And, you know, it's, you know, I think you'd be, you know, somebody would probably throw up their hands. What is the meaning of all this? Like, you know, life sucks. So what, you know, suicide, is that an option? Plus I'm a failure and I suck, which I think a lot of people tell themselves that they're their own worst critics. Then I don't think anybody can tell anybody anything worse than what we tell ourselves in our own heads at certain times, right? You know. But anyway, so if we can embrace the world as meaningless and failure is always there, why not just end your life? So, and Cioran, he didn't think this is the right answer for several reasons. Again, he talks about this being a forbidden subject, you know, suicide, kind of not talking about it in society, kind of not talking about taboo subjects. Like, for example, I think it's kind of a taboo subject that, you know, we take our elderly and put them off into retirement communities now. They're, you of like, okay, you're used up, your working life is used up, yada, yada, yada. You know, for some, that can be a very lonely existence. I've talked to some of my patients who are older who definitely have contemplated suicide for those mere reasons, because they do this all self-doubt, self-talk, and they feel like because of that, it stifles them. So they're not constantly out socializing with people or trying to make meaning out of their life and trying to connect with people and have social connections. So I think it could be stifling. But with that, if things get really bad, a lot of people, and I think, and it's normal, will contemplate this, not necessarily go through with it, but will certainly contemplate it. And I've had a number of my patients throughout my practice who have talked about it. So Cioran says that the thing that this is funny. He said, you know, one of the things I love about my life is knowing that suicide is always an option for me. So it keeps me going, you know?
Yeah.
You know, and
I think it's an empowering statement as well, because that hit home with me quite a bit, Keoni. And just it's, you know, even just in the context of like, let's say you work a job, you hate the job, at any moment you could quit the job, and just that feeling, or just knowing that that's a possibility for you, that, you know, this isn't, you know, no one has control over your life. It really is yours to control. In this context of suicide, even understanding that you have that control, or it's constantly up to you, is empowering.
Yeah, it is, right. So it's like think about it as not the last option, but something that is available to you if you ever need it, and try to make some meaning out of it. So suicide is kind of an option in life, but just like you have the option to, as Stephen West was talking about, to do 20 push-ups, drop down to do 20 push-ups right now. Why don't you do it? If you do it, are you moving more towards your goal? So with suicide, what is your goal with that? How is that intellectually? How is that helping you? You know, a lot of people say, well, it will stop my suffering. But on another hand is that whole saying that, well, it's already too late. You're already suffered. So why commit suicide? You've already experienced the suffering. So why go through it now? I mean, you know, you've already experienced the worst of it. So anyway, he said, you know, what is the problem of suicide? What is it getting you closer to achieving? And he talks about suicide as a temporal problem and just a general error in understanding of life. So temporal, he's basically saying, you know, you can always commit suicide. You can always commit suicide later, and most people do it too late anyway, right? So what he means is you already experienced the inherent pain of existence, and you and also you don't know what the future holds. So ending your life to solve a problem that has already come and gone does not really solve the problem,
right?
So that's how that's how he intellectualizes it. And also, it's a you know, kind of a misunderstanding life. Someone that considers suicide has not actually thought through the nature of existence yet. This is what he's saying. It is a journey to understanding reality that you are always learning, and you're resting along the way. So it's kind of a journey that you're going through. You have your ups and downs. He has this kind of saying where only optimists succeed at suicide. Optimists that no longer succeed at being optimists. So if you get slapped in the face, if you're always constantly an optimist and you get slapped in the face with the reality of life, then you have a really good chance of succeeding at suicide. So it's like, don't embrace these taboo subjects of failure, suicide, even talking about loneliness and things like that. So I just think it's a fascinating thing. It's a philosophical kind of discussion, a way to intellectualize it. Does it help you to eliminate the suffering? Well, no, not necessarily. But if you really are intellectual about it, you know, if you've lived life, that there's always downs and there's always ups. And so you embrace the absurdity of it to enjoy these cycles of ups and downs.
Yeah.
And so you consider suicide, you know, as maybe, or the contemplation of it as embracing your failure or whatever you think the failure is, so that you can succeed later. So you can use it as a jumping off point to help better yourself. And it is, right? Helping better yourself and others, especially if you can get real with others who are actually going through it. That's one of the reasons why I think people have really gone through it. Like if other people that are contemplating that can talk to people that have actually contemplated it, it would be helpful, like with some of these suicide hotlines, or, you know, or, you know, I think when people are down and out, this is where we can really get honest and real with ourselves.
Right.
And if you have the time, if you take the time to do that, contemplating suicide, you know, it could definitely save your life. You know, if you take the time to stop
dive into
and
it
wait.
more. Right.
Yeah, to dive into it. So he also says having no reason to live. If you have no reason to live, and he intellectualizes it, then why would you have any reason to die?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So he really delved into like these taboo subjects that I just think are fascinating, and he used them to kind of embrace life and success, and you know, to understand failure, to understand suicide, the absurdness of life, to help him succeed. I mean, this guy has written numerous books. The titles of his books are fascinating, because you think this guy is going to commit suicide. Like, you're talking about books. The title, A Short History of Decay, is one of his books. The Trouble with Being Born is another one of his books. On the Heights of Despair is another one.
Like
the
this
book
guy.
the Book of Delusions. So he sounds like, you know, he sounds like at any moment he is going to commit suicide. And he really thought about it, thought about it a lot, but he used it to help himself succeed. And I also think anybody who reads him, who is actually going through this or having a real struggle, can really get a lot out of him.
Where do you suggest people start? With Emil Cioran, correct?
Emil Cioran, yeah.
Cioran.
Emil, and then Cioran, Cioran. Yeah.
And would you recommend they start with this podcast that you and I listen to? Would
Yeah,
you
I think
recommend the book?
I recommend that podcast to a lot of people. I love Stephen West's podcast, Philosophize This. I think it's great. I think it's very, very helpful for people who have an existential crises, which we all do have at some point. I think it's worth listening to. I think philosophy can be a lifesaver for a lot of people. I think his podcast is great. So I recommend it.
Okay. Yeah.
Let's see.
You can also, I know we did, now I forget what it's titled, but it's Failure, Overcoming It, something like that. It was like our third or fourth episode. I talked about failing, I think a practical or something like that in PT school. So it'd be interesting, even for me, to go back and listen to that one, come back and listen to this one.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be pretty interesting to see, especially.
I probably couldn't sit through
it. Yeah, based on what we know now, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, that's just some of the things that I want to do this podcast, because this past few months I've had a lot of people like just having a really rough time with life right now, based on what's going on in the world, going on with COVID and stuff like that. Certainly contemplating the meaninglessness of life. I had a few contemplate, this sucks, I'm taking myself out. And, I think some of these things are really good. Like, okay, well, you've already gone through the suffering. Why do it now? And it's always an option anyway. So you can always do it later. So why don't you just do it later? Put it off. And a lot of times when you put it off, guess what happens? Life all of a sudden seems to be better all of a sudden. So it's always an option. This was what Emil Cioran would say. It's always an option. So why do it now? And I'm shortchanging myself because I don't know what the future holds. If I embrace my failures, and this is like considered an ultimate failure, life just sucks. If I embrace my failures, I know intellectually that I'm going to be more likely to succeed. So, and a lot of people come out of existential crises like this much better for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
the other thing is it gives you pause, because a lot of suicide is for some people emotionally driven and stuff like that, and and not even thought about. It's done in a split second or whatever. So it certainly can help when people who may be prone to that, which I think we all can be, to embrace these taboo subjects and talk about it. I think Emil Cioran is very real with the world, at least in my worldview. I mean, it's fine if you want to believe it, that, the universe has your back, but honestly, it's a very random place we live in.
That's a nice thought.
Well, but here's the thing. I mean, for me, here's the thing. It's like, you never know. You never know when your last day is. It could be anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
For me, embracing these taboo subjects of failure and suicide or whatever is a way to help move yourself along, and to help one to be more kind, to be a better person in the world. This is why I love philosophy, and to enjoy life better. I mean, for me, if I'm thinking about how crazy life is, I mean, it makes me kind of just laugh, and then it also makes me grateful, that I get to experience the time that I have, considering all the potential lives that never were, that never got to this place. So suicide is always
in a different context.
Yeah. Suicide is always an option, but what's the rush, really? He actually, Emil Cioran said,
by suicide in 19.
What's that?
He died by suicide in 1950.
No, he didn't actually. He
okay,
lived a full life. But you would think he would have from these books he wrote. But he did say this: without the idea of suicide, I would have surely killed myself.
Yeah, I like that.
So the idea of suicide and actually doing are two different things. The idea of it helps you to succeed and find meaning and to laugh about it.
Yeah. And to rationalize through it all, and to dive into that meaninglessness, to kind of circle back around completely.
Right. And he would always say, you always have any time, you can put it off, and you should put it off as long as, but it's always an option. So it's always there. He used that to help him get through his life. So yeah, I think he was, I would have loved to have a conversation with him, because he sounds very, I don't know. It sounds like an intellectual nihilist or something, who's very like he has some struggle there, but anyway, I look at him as a person who got real with the world and wrote it all down,
and struggled through it, which is why he can help us today.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So Emil Cioran, I think he takes it a level beyond Stoicism, so that's one of the reasons why I like philosophy. So yes, check out Philosophize This. I'm giving Stephen West a plug. His podcasts are incredible. Stephen West, come on, man. Get on this podcast with Keoni. Keoni loves you. I've listened to like 4 or 5 year episodes because of Keoni. Yeah, we definitely got to get him on. Anyway, I hope that was helpful, guys. Anything else we should talk about? No, I think that kind of wraps it up and puts a little bow on it there. It is. Taboo topics are these are some of my favorite podcasts to do, Keoni, because it's interesting to go, we have an age difference. Yeah. We agree on a lot of things, we disagree on a lot of things, and just to have these conversations, nonetheless, put them out to the world is different. So yeah, I appreciate it. All right, take care, everybody. Be well.